Moon Knight. Moon Knight was always a little off. When he debuted, he looked like Marvel's answer to Batman, a rich guy with gadgets, a cape, and an appetite for beating up criminals in the dark. He had multiple aliases too. Mark Spector, the mercenary, Stephen Grant, the millionaire, Jake Lockley, the cab driver. Originally, those identities were nothing fancy, just disguises, handy tools for getting things done. That was it. Then things got weird. And that weirdness is exactly why Moon Knight became one of Marvel's most fascinating characters. By the 2000s, Marvel leaned all the way in and redefined those aliases as something deeper. Moon Knight didn't just play different roles, he had dissociative identity disorder. Every personality was an alter, splintered from trauma. Mark Spector wasn't just using disguises to fight crime, he was fighting his own fractured mind. But Marvel didn't stop there. The retcon blurred the line between reality and delusion. Is Khonshu, the Egyptian god who supposedly resurrected Mark and made him his fist of vengeance, even real? Or just another hallucination, a divine excuse for violence? In the Jeff Lemire and Declan Shalvey runs, this ambiguity became the heart of the character. Moon Knight's world started to reflect his chaotic mind. Surreal, dreamlike, terrifying. This retcon didn't just give Moon Knight depth, it made his stories unpredictable and personal. Readers never knew whether to trust Mark's narration or doubt everything they saw on the page. No other Marvel hero felt this unstable, and that instability became the hook. Court of Owls. Batman prides himself on knowing Gotham inside and out. Every alley, every crook, every shadow. But then came the Court of Owls, and suddenly the world's greatest detective looked like he'd missed the biggest clue of all. The genius of this retcon? The court wasn't new. They'd supposedly been there all along, woven into Gotham's architecture and history, pulling strings from the shadows for centuries. Nursery rhymes whispered about them. Beware the Court of Owls that watches all the time. But even Bruce Wayne dismissed them as urban legend. Scott Snyder's Court of Owls arc dropped and rewired Gotham's entire history. The court was everywhere. The Waynes were being watched. Gotham's architecture was laced with owl symbols. Even Wayne Manor hid tunnels that ran straight into their lairs. The Talons, their undead assassins, made things even scarier. Recruited from the circus, these operatives could heal from fatal wounds and emerge from cryo-storage centuries later, ready to kill again. Their one weakness? Extreme cold, a detail that gave Batman a desperate edge when these monsters came hunting. This retcon was brilliant because it didn't contradict established history. Instead, it filled in blanks readers didn't even realize were there. Gotham suddenly felt ancient, haunted, and layered with secrets. And Batman, who once seemed in total control of his city, was thrown into paranoia and doubt, to top, if off. Owls are literal predators of bats. So thematically, the court became the perfect rival, a predator that's been quietly watching while Batman thought he was on top. This twist didn't just challenge Batman physically, it shattered his confidence in everything he thought he knew. Wolverine. When Wolverine first appeared back in 1974's Incredible Hulk 180 to 181, he was a total enigma. A Canadian government agent with claws, no clear origin, and no name. Fans didn't even know Logan was his name yet. For years, Marvel kept the mystery alive, dropping hints and scattered flashbacks that led nowhere. Then came one of comics' slowest, most satisfying retcons, Weapon X. In the early 90s, Barry Windsor Smith's iconic story revealed Wolverine's transformation into a living weapon, subjected to horrific experiments that bonded adamantium to his skeleton and erased his memories. Logan didn't volunteer for this. He was captured, tortured, and turned into a tool. That revelation reshaped everything. Wolverine wasn't just a gruff loner, he was a victim of deep psychological trauma, trapped by his shattered past. And Marvel kept adding layers. In Fatal Attractions, Magneto ripped the adamantium from Logan's bones, revealing that his claws weren't implants. They were bone. The claws had always been part of him. Then, in 2001, nearly 3 decades after his debut, Marvel pulled the curtain back fully in origin. Logan's true name? James Howlett, born in 19th century Canada to a wealthy family. His mutation emerged in childhood, in the middle of a family tragedy. This origin didn't just explain his healing factor, it set a foundation of heartbreak and loss that defined him. Wolverine's history didn't come in one big reveal. It unfolded piece by piece, keeping fans hooked for years. That slow burn approach made his backstory one of the most engaging in comics, and every retcon added emotional weight. Every swing and snarl was driven by a man clawing his way back from decades of manipulation and tragedy. Winter Soldier. For decades, Bucky Barnes' death was sacred in Marvel lore. Captain America's teenage sidekick, killed during a World War II mission gone wrong, was one of those rare character deaths that actually stuck, until it didn't. In 2005, Ed Brubaker's legendary run on Captain America changed everything and pulled off one of comics' riskiest retcons: Bucky never died. Instead, Soviet forces recovered his body after that fateful explosion, wiped his memories, replaced his missing arm with a cybernetic one, and turned him into the Winter Soldier, an elite assassin frozen between missions to stay youthful and deadly. Suddenly, the innocent wartime mascot became a hardened ghost, silent, lethal, and surgically precise. Where Captain America represented hope, the Winter Soldier embodied everything. Dark about the Cold War, secrecy, paranoia, and morally gray warfare. It redefined Bucky as a tragic figure, used, discarded, and lost to history. The brilliance of the retcon was that it didn't erase Cap's grief, it deepened it. The man Steve Rogers had mourned was still alive but broken, and now his enemy. Their eventual reconciliation wasn't quick or easy. When Steve helped restore Bucky's memories using the Cosmic Cube, Bucky's guilt over what he'd done as the Winter Soldier became one of Marvel's richest redemption arcs. For a stretch, Bucky stepped into the role of Captain America not as a nostalgia act, but as proof he was ready to evolve. This retcon worked because it didn't just bring a character back, it layered history, trauma, and espionage into a compelling modern myth. Today, Winter Soldier is one of Marvel's most iconic anti-heroes, all thanks to a retcon that took a permanent death and turned it into a masterstroke of storytelling. Swamp Thing. When Swamp Thing first appeared in the 1970s, his story was simple. Alec Holland, a brilliant scientist, caught in an explosion, doused in chemicals, crawls into the swamp, and rises as a tragic plant monster, desperately clinging to what's left of his humanity. A classic monster origin with a human heart at the center. Then Alan Moore came along in the 1980s and flipped the script. Alec Holland didn't become Swamp Thing. Swamp Thing just thought he was Alec Holland. In Moore's hands, Swamp Thing wasn't a transformed man. He was a sentient plant elemental, a creature grown from the swamp that absorbed Holland's memories when the scientist died. This retcon was seismic. It stripped Swamp Thing of his tragic man-turned-monster premise and made him something more haunting, a plant that believed it was human. Suddenly, the story wasn't about getting his humanity back. It was about realizing he never had it to begin with. But Moore didn't stop at one revelation. This redefinition opened the door to the green, a vast elemental force connecting all plant life on Earth. Swamp Thing became an avatar of nature itself, guardian of life, warrior for the planet. His enemies weren't just mad scientists anymore. They were pollution, decay, the rot. The Parliament of Trees, past Swamp Things and elemental lore, flowed from this retcon, transforming Swamp Thing from a niche horror comic into a philosophical, environmental epic. Horror, romance, existential dread. It all worked because Moore gave Swamp Thing cosmic scope without losing emotional intimacy. In the end, this retcon transformed Swamp Thing's entire identity, turning him into a cornerstone of Vertigo and a symbol of what smart reinvention could do. Crisis on Infinite Earths. By the early 1980s, DC Comics was drowning in continuity chaos. Earth 1, Earth 2, Earth 3, timelines everywhere, duplicate characters running wild, and a multiverse so tangled that new readers barely stood a chance. Golden Age heroes, Silver Age reboots, alternate worlds colliding. It was a mess. Then came Crisis on Infinite Earths in 1985, a 12-issue mega event that didn't just tweak continuity, it took a wrecking ball to the entire DC universe. The Anti-Monitor was the narrative weapon, destroying entire worlds panel by panel, and behind the scenes, DC was consolidating decades of history into one streamlined universe. The stakes? Unbelievable. Barry Allen's Flash sacrificed himself running into the Speed Force to stop the Anti-Monitor's antimatter cannon. Supergirl died fighting to save Superman's life. Entire worlds, characters, and histories were wiped clean. DC wasn't just rewriting a chapter, they were erasing entire books. But here's the genius of this retcon. It didn't discard everything fans loved. It merged the best parts of DC's sprawling history into a single, cohesive timeline. Only one Superman, one Wonder Woman, one Batman. No more duplicates from alternate worlds. It made the DC universe feel cleaner, modern, and accessible without denying its rich past. Post-Crisis, the slate was fresh. Batman, Year One, the Man of Steel reboot, Wally West stepping into the spotlight as the new Flash, and so much more. Everything felt grounded, character-driven, and full of opportunity. And this wasn't just cleanup for cleanup's sake, it was a creative rebirth that sparked some of DC's most beloved stories for the next 2 decades. The multiverse was gone, but DC was more alive than ever. Hulk. The Hulk's early stories were simple. Scientist Bruce Banner gets blasted by gamma rays, transforms into a raging green monster when angry, and smashes his way through Marvel history. For years, that was enough. A classic Jekyll and Hyde dynamic. Sometimes he was gray, sometimes he was green, sometimes smart, sometimes dumb. Writers didn't really explain why. Then came one of Marvel's most impactful retcons. The Hulk isn't just a product of science, he's a product of trauma. Legendary writer Peter David cracked open Banner's mind and revealed that the Hulk's many personas, Savage Brute, Cunning Gray Enforcer, even Professor Hulk, were more than side effects of radiation. They were manifestations of dissociative identity disorder. Bruce's abusive childhood at the hands of his violent father, that's where the fractures started. The gamma bomb didn't cause his personalities, it just unlocked what was already buried deep inside. Each Hulk reflected a different part of Bruce's psyche. The Savage Hulk was his terrified inner child, Joe Fixit, the Gray Hulk, was cynical and streetwise, and Professor Hulk was an uneasy attempt at integration. This retcon didn't just add depth, it gave the Hulk's erratic behavior a heartbreaking logic. Every shift in color, size, intelligence, or temperament was tied to Bruce's internal struggles. Later runs, like Immortal Hulk, leaned into this hard, turning the Hulk into an almost mythic figure tied to horror, death, and even cosmic forces. Hawkman. For years, Hawkman was DC's poster child for confusing continuity. Was he Carter Hall, reincarnated Egyptian prince? Qatar Hall, alien cop from Thanagar? Both? Neither? Writers couldn't seem to agree, and every attempt to fix his backstory only made things messier. Then, in 2018, Robert Venditti stepped up and delivered one of the smartest retcons in comic history, Hawkman's entire chaotic history. All of it being true. Every version, the Egyptian prince, the space cop, the Victorian adventurer, even alternate universe incarnations, they were all the same soul reborn again and again across time, space, and even dimensions. Suddenly, what looked like a hopeless tangle became a brilliant tapestry. Hawkman wasn't just a guy with wings, he was a cosmic avatar of redemption and reincarnation, cursed to live countless lives, saving as many as he could to atone for the sins of his original incarnation, Qatar Deathbringer, a brutal warlord who once wiped out entire civilizations. This retcon didn't wipe away contradictions, it embraced them. Past lives weren't mistakes or abandoned storylines, they were mythology. Venditti even expanded Hawkman's legacy to include wild new incarnations, dragon-riding warriors, Kryptonian scientists, microverse explorers, and more. His story now spanned epochs and worlds, making Hawkman feel like one of DC's deepest characters, not just a guy who happened to like swinging a mace. For the first time, Hawkman's tangled past gave him a clear, emotional purpose, a hero doomed to wander existence, trying to balance the scales of his ancient sins. And that shift turned one of DC's most confusing heroes into one of its most fascinating, Green Lantern. For decades, Green Lantern lore was simple. Willpower equals green. Hal Jordan and his ring worked because he could conquer fear. Straightforward, right? But when Jeff Johns took over in the mid-2000s, he cracked that open and gave the mythology one of the best expansions in comic history, the emotional spectrum. Suddenly, the Green Lantern Corps wasn't alone. Across the galaxy existed 7 different corps, each powered by a different emotion and color. From the rage-fueled Red Lanterns, to the hopeful Blue Lanterns, to the terrifying Sinestro Corps of fear itself. Love, avarice, compassion, every part of human feeling now had cosmic representation. Johns didn't just slap on new colors for fun, he wove a deep philosophy into the story. Each emotion had a place on the spectrum, with willpower perfectly balanced in the center. Not truly an emotion, but the force needed to channel all others. And the Guardians of the Universe? Their disdain for emotions made even more sense now. They built their core on willpower precisely because it was the easiest to control. The brilliance came from tying all this back into old lore. Sinestro's yellow ring of fear? No longer just a gimmick, it was part of a cosmic opposition. Fear versus will. And that mysterious old weakness where Green Lantern rings couldn't affect anything yellow? Johns revealed it was due to Parallax, a cosmic entity of pure fear imprisoned in the central power battery itself. This retcon turned Green Lantern from space cop stories into an entire cosmic mythology. Fans who never cared about Hal Jordan were suddenly picking sides, imagining which corps they'd join. It added complexity, purpose, and endless storytelling fuel, and transformed Green Lantern into one of DC's most vibrant franchises. Parallax and the Yellow Weakness. For decades, Green Lantern rings had one weird flaw. They couldn't affect anything yellow. The in-universe explanation? Hal Jordan's will just needed to be stronger. Readers? They shrugged it off as a quirky Silver Age rule. But in the 1990s, everything changed, and the retcon that followed didn't just fix the problem, it elevated it into terrifying cosmic lore. The turning point came in Emerald Twilight when Hal Jordan, grieving the destruction of Coast City, snapped. He stormed the Guardians' home planet. Oa wiped out the entire Green Lantern Corps and absorbed all the power from the central power battery. And when he emerged, he wasn't Hal anymore. He was Parallax. At first, this seemed like a heel turn for shock value. Hal, the best of the Lanterns, going full villain. But a few years later, Jeff Johns' Green Lantern Rebirth revealed the retcon that changed everything. Parallax wasn't just Hal's new name. Parallax was an ancient cosmic parasite of pure fear, imprisoned inside the central power battery all along. That's why the rings couldn't affect Yellow. Parallax's essence infected them, and that's why Hal fell. His mind had been slowly manipulated, corroded by the embodiment of fear itself. Suddenly, Hal's dark turn was cosmic possession. This retcon reframed Emerald Twilight. Hal was still responsible for the damage, but now readers understood the true stakes. And with Parallax's revelation, the Sinestro Corps War, the emotional spectrum, and Blackest Night all had a stronger foundation. It transformed Green Lantern's mythology. The yellow weakness became one of its greatest strengths, a flaw that led directly into one of the DC Universe's most epic modern sagas. And that's it. Now to you, if you could rewrite one iconic comic character's entire history with a single retcon, who would you pick? And what secret would you add to change everything? Drop your best plot twist in the comments as you leave a like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell for more amazing videos like this one.